Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. Thank you for your virtual presence in today's research seminar. So the topic of my paper is Scriptural Literacy in the Joint Reading of Muslim Christian Scriptures. So this is the significance, challenges, and opportunities in Indonesian context. So let me begin with this presentation with several starting points that the idea of this research actually came from several experiences that I had during my engagement in Muslim-Christians relations, particularly in reading the Bible and Quran together, both in Indonesia and then for several times in the UK. So this research also came out of my personal concern, my personal interest for developing a joint Muslim-Christian scriptural reading traditions in the Indonesian context. I've been doing such reading and aiming to continue and to develop it in the future. I want also to clarify or make a disclaimer that this paper is still my initial thought. So the nature of this paper is, of course, explorative. So it is a work in progress. So I expect your valuable comments and suggestions on it later after this presentation. So what do we mean by a joint reading of Muslim and Christian scriptures? So the joint reading of Muslim Christian scripture has its root actually in the scriptural reasoning. I make it short SR in this tradition. And for those not familiar with this tradition or practice, I would like to explain it briefly about this. In terms of definition, actually, there is no single working definition given to scriptural reasoning. However, according to one of its exponents, the scriptural reasoning is a practice of group reading of scriptures of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam that builds sociality among its practitioners and releases sources of reason, compassion, and divine spirit for healing our separate communities and for the repair of the world. So this is a three communities, Jewish, Christian, and also Muslim. They gather together to read their own scriptures and share what they have, or they reflect about a certain passage. So in Indonesian context, actually, we cannot do between the three communities because we only have Muslim and Christians. We don't have a Jewish community in Indonesia. So it must be only Muslim and Christian joining together to read their own scriptures. So scriptural reasoning gathers people around sacred texts for discussions, explorations, and reflection across faith lines. Its focus is on developing an understanding of religion as experienced by faith participants through shared dialogue around sacred texts. So the aim of this practice is not necessarily for participants to agree with one another, but to learn and to explore together, to dive deeper into one's own tradition in attentive engagement with other traditions. So there are several principles within this practice. So the first principle is that the scriptural reasoning concerns for learning and understanding. It provides a space for participants to share knowledge and insights from their own faith traditions alongside hearing about other perspectives from different faith traditions. So this approach to interfaith encounters builds understanding of the other through the process of dialogue. So the second one is that scriptural reasoning aims to explore differences and maintain identity. It is not about finding consensus. Instead, it is about finding ways to disagree well. So this aspect of scriptural reasoning is beneficial in providing a context where all participants can explore the place of the differences without giving up their identity and beliefs. And lastly, scriptural reasoning actually strives to develop hospitality and building friendship. So the reading process embraces the concept of mutual hospitality, where friendship can grow and develop. The meeting place concept in this scriptural reasoning, which is at the heart of the scriptural reasoning encounters, provides an opportunity for shared hospitality. So the space is not owned or inhabited by one group over another. Instead, it is a space where participants are both host and guest simultaneously. David Ford, one of the proponents of this practice, proposed the metaphor of tent of meeting. So this place is considered as a portable, safe place that can become a spiritual center to explore faith from different perspectives. So to get an idea about what scriptural reasoning is, I am now showing I don't know if I can turn back. Yeah, this is the picture when me and my Muslim colleague facilitate the practice of joint reading Muslim Christian scriptures for Muslim and Christian university students in my place. We don't meet in the very fancy place or formal place. We just meet at the porch of one of my friend's house, and then we gather around like 30 to 40 Muslim Christian students, and we divided them into several groups to do the joint reading of Bible and the Quran. So so the standard practice of this reading is that there are 6 to 8 participants. They are gather in group, and ideally similar numbers of participants from each of different faiths, from Muslim and Christians. And then there is a recitations of or reading well of a piece of scriptures, and a shared personal explanation given by the readers within between the individuals or within the group. So in that reading, they explore, discuss, and share their interpretations of the meanings embedded in the text. So during this time, participants also give an opportunity to ask with the interrogative and text-based questions, and share insights through the guidance of a group facilitator. So this is the idea of what we call the joining reading of Muslim and Christian scriptures. So based on my personal experience, however, I found out that there are issues I have been encountering while facilitating this reading. So the first one is a difficulty in maintaining the balance between academic and practical things. So the reading becomes a mere cognitive exercise, and it is one of the ways individuals make sense of written language, a strategy by which readers decode and comprehend the text. So it's more on the cognitive issue. In 2006, my colleague here at CMCS, Dr. Richard McCallum, made a public report of Cambridge Interfaith Program Summer School from 2011 to 2015. And he mentioned that the foundation of this CIP summer school is scriptural reasoning. And he also reported that some participants felt that scriptural reasoning practice was only suitable for academic contexts. So one research that evaluates practice of scriptural reasoning done by a group of interfaith students in an Indonesian Christian university shows that scriptural reasoning practice tended to focus and depend on participants' intellectual and perceptual capacities or skills. So it made most of the participants feel inadequate to follow the discussion. So secondly, although its goal is to build sociality, hospitality, and friendship among participants, and also reconciliation, it can be achieved. Scriptural reasoning seemingly lacks focus on direct social or cultural engagement to transform society. So if we look into the standard practice of scriptural reasoning that we already seen earlier, we cannot find actually activity or place where the participants directly address social, cultural, contextual issues. So from here, we may raise an old question. This is a question by Paulo Freire. He asked, what is to ensure that after people read or comprehend the text, they will do it correctly? So the same research conducted by what I mentioned earlier in a Christian university also shows that the participants felt that the practice of scriptural reasoning does not directly address the internal and external social practices. So the exploration and comprehensions of the text were merely an abstract discourse and were not translated into actions. So to deal with this issue, I propose the concept of scriptural literacy that I will explain later. So the concept has its basis on the literacy studies, particularly the new literary studies or new literary theory, new literacy theory that occurs since 1980s. So since that time, there has been a shift in literacy studies. In the literacy studies, from perceiving literacy as cognitive of mental phenomenon to a social cultural phenomenon. So new literacy studies perceive literacy is no longer an issue of reading and writing skill, but social practices that vary from one context to another. So literacy here is best understood as a set of social practices. So what do we mean by social practice here? Social practice are learned behavior patterns that enable us to coordinate as members of a group in creating, distributing, managing, maintaining, and evaluating a resource. And these practices happen due to mutual responsiveness to each other's behavior and the resources in question, as interpreted through shared meaning, cultural schemas. Since it's related to the practice, sometimes literacy becomes a literacy practice. These terms refer to how people use and apply the discourse in their everyday lives. This practice or practices involve values, attitudes, feelings, and social relationship. In the simplest sense, these are what people do with literacy. And these are internal to individuals while at the same time being social process that connect people. So this is both internal and external expressions. So literally focus on how this practice are used and applied in social life and can increase awareness of the diversity of literacy experiences. So the focus here that how when you read something or the text, you will experience this literacy experiences. So this includes the ability to effectively communicate face to face. So literacy means that you don't only know how to read or write, but also to communicate well. So literacy recognizes the importance of listening and talking and effective collaborative working to develop thinking, learning, and doing. So overall, the scriptural literacy mainly that I propose mainly focus on social cultural phenomenon in reading the scriptures rather than a cognitive or mental phenomenon. According to G, I quoted, knowledge and meaning are seen as emerging from social practices or activities in which people, environments, tools, technologies, objects, words, acts, and symbols are linked to networked with each other and dynamically interact with and on each other. So end quote. So to propose a tentative definitions, I consider scriptural reasoning as a scriptural skill or competence gained through participation patterns in contextual communities of practice. And these communities of practice actually apply the interaction, the sharing, conventions, norms, values, and practices or experiences, and use them to engage in learning and in society. So a joint scriptural reading here becomes a literacy event where literacy activities or practices exist and create new narratives and also actions. Freire introduced a term emancipatory literacy. So he believed that literacy only empowers people when it renders them active questioners of the social reality around them. He then wrote, when we learn to read and write, it is also important to learn to think correctly. And to think correctly, we should think about our practice in work. We should think about our daily lives. So I made a diagram here, if you can see in the monitor, that scriptural literacy takes place in the community of practice. So on the left, we see in this community, there is a reading of the text, the reading of the scriptures. So it involves the activities of decoding, interpreting, comprehending, or exploring the text together. And some would call it the abstract reasoning. However, it should not stop there. It has to include the engagement in social practice, the internal and external social practice, and the creations of new narratives and actions. So there is an output of this this gathering within the community of practice. So the objectives of this scriptural literacy is to reconstruct, to reiterate, and to extract the scriptural text from the participant situated argument and context. And secondly, it aims to share a collective sense of knowledge and experience, and then to work or to act together in dealing with a particular social or cultural issues. And lastly, it aims to set strategies for doing so, or to use them in the most effective way. So overall, scriptural literacy is, for me, is very significant because scriptural literacy potentially could enhance scriptural reasoning from abstract reasoning to a concrete or social practicing. Secondly, scriptural literacy takes place in the world and society, not just in the mind. It is a social or cultural achievement centered in social or cultural practices. And thirdly, scriptural literacy develops participants' capacity to use the text and its discussion, the discourse, to analyze, to produce, to apply its meaning, and in the end, to transform their society. And I found out that I was thinking about the challenges if this scriptural literacy will be applied to an Indonesian context, because as of now, we see that there is still the exclusive or interfaith scriptural, the emphasis on the interfaith scriptural reading. Christians and Muslims are more comfortable to read their own scripture for themselves and within their own community. And as a result, the reading has no impact to interfaith discourse, and also there is no impact to society. And I still found out that there are a lot of, we call it a popular polemic apologetical Muslim Christian encounters, especially when you see literatures and social media. And according to one research that I found, that this model, the polemic apologetical encounters, continues to influence the characteristics of Islamic or Christian literatures in Indonesia. So the conflict, the tension between Muslim and Christians are still relevant in Indonesia today, and this will become a challenge for doing scriptural literacy. And also I see also the dominant religious authority is still there. And according to Claudia Sais, she said that religious authority figures in Indonesia form the core of any given religious scape. And a religious scape is a dynamic social space where one religious practice or religious interpretation is predominant. And so we'll see that there is still a paternalistic concept here. And lastly, we see that there is still a single or hegemonic scriptural or textual interpretation, especially among these religious fundamentalists or conservatives. But I can see also that there is an opportunity, or there are opportunities that I can still see in this context. Oh, sorry, I did not. Yeah, these are the challenges we see. I forgot to move my PowerPoint presentation. And can still see now the opportunities here. And as if you attended last week research seminar by Dr. Riddle, you'll see that there is a shift in Muslim-Christian relationship in Southeast Asia, and particularly, it applied to Indonesia, that there's a trajectory from antipathy in the earlier earlier decades, and then it moves to apologetic or apologetic, and then now we are more or tend to be more on this stage, the accommodation and also the affinity. So there is an opportunity, a chance for us, I mean, for Muslim and Christians to sit together and to read their scriptures. And then also there is a high percentage of scriptural illiteracy. It means that they don't really, what do you call it? They don't really read, study, understand, and then apply actually their scripture. So within Muslim and Christian communities, and according to a research, there are 68% Muslims don't know how to read the Quran, and also for Christians, even though they can read, but they sometimes they don't understand, they don't talk about that, and they don't discuss about it. So there are 57%, sorry, it's that 60%. Yeah, 57% of Christians who do that. So the third one, the opportunity is that there is a growing number of young educated Muslim and Christians who are open, moderate, sociable, and progressive. And they also concerned with social and cultural changes. So as I mentioned earlier, that I have an opportunity to gather Muslim and Christians. They are college students, university students, and then they can read Bible and Quran together with eagerness. So the conclusions of my paper will be like this: the inclusion of scriptural literacy in the joint reading Muslim and Christian scriptures is significant in the Indonesian context. It is not only essential for maintaining the focus, the purpose of the reading, that is building sociality and reconciliation, but also for attaining its direct social cultural impact on the society. So I will end my presentation here. So I would be open to comments or discussions.